Welcome to the Decolonising Education YouTube channel. Today we're talking about youth activism and I've got two special guests with me. I'm going to start off by asking each of you to just quickly introduce who you are, what you're currently studying at the moment and how you got into activism. So Abdullah, do you want to start us off?
Hi, my name is Abdullah. I'm at university at the moment doing mechanical engineering final year. So I got involved in 2016 with Black Lives Matter rally that we organized in Sheffield. So I was one of the organizers, and our basically activism started because of the brutality that Black people have been facing by police, mainly in America, but also that is occurring in the UK as well. So for us, we just wanted to rally up Sheffield and get Sheffield to understand what's going on. So it was a peaceful rally, and we had over 3,000 people coming. And our main organizer, actually, he was featured in Sky News as well, with Afro Hedge. So that was really powerful for us to get that opportunity. So I think for me, growing up in Sheffield, it was about making sure that we had a voice as young people and that we pushed for our rights to be heard, especially people of color who I think are the most marginalized, really, if we think about it. So from that, that same year, actually, I met Jeremy Corbyn at a Labour meeting. I got a call randomly one day, and I was told, by the way, Jeremy Corbyn's coming the next day to Sheffield, and they told me to go to Cleveland. And I had never been to Cleveland before, and I was like, I don't want to go to that area. I'm not gonna lie. No offense if you're from the area. And so I ended up going to Cleveland, and we met with Jeremy Corbyn, and I was really inspired by the stuff that he was talking about and what he was saying. And then from that, I joined the Labour Party. I heard about Jeremy Corbyn actually beforehand, and I was already planning to join because of Jeremy Corbyn, the principles and the values he stood on. So I joined Labour Party, and from there, I just got involved with any opportunity that came through. I just got involved with different organizing groups. And then when I started university, I got engaged with different societies, and I got involved with political groups. And then by the end of 2017, 2018 academic year, last year, I got elected as the first East African Muslim president at Sheffield Hallam Students' Union. So that was an opportunity to represent 35,000 students that study at Sheffield Hallam. And that was a really great experience for me, but it pushed me to understand how structural racism work in institutions. It got me to understand the lack of opportunities that is available, and that if we don't push those who have the power, if we don't push them and hold them to account, then we won't get our way, and that no one will ever represent us if we don't put ourselves out there. And so that's why I got involved with politics and just social activism as a whole.
Thank you so much. Roanne?
Hi, so my name's Roanne and I'm 16 years old. And I'm currently in year 11. And for me, really, I started last year when I was 15. I started a movement called OUR, also known as Our and Own Your Rights. And I guess the passion came from when I was younger. I've always been interested in human nature / human rights. So for me, really, I didn't like the homelessness figures. I don't like the wars in different countries. I did not like the justice system. And I don't like the justice system, really. And I didn't like what was being done about it either. And that left, for me, a trace of questioning myself, whether I could do something about it, or whether I was just going to become another figure of those who basically became numb to the tragedies as they slowly began to turn into casualties. And then that question just became the rhetorical question to I. So, I started my own movement called Own Your Rights, where I guess, and simply, I listen and then speak. But when I say that, I say speak, listen and then speak. I say it because those who claim power and have a higher status actually don't do that. They don't listen and then speak. and when I say power, I actually say quote unquote, because do they actually truly have power? You know, that's something that I question myself as I get older, like day by day. And because the noun power is the capacity or ability to direct or influence others or have the course of events, and the verb power is to travel with great speed or force, that is actually power. So it just led me to really question myself and start conversations. And, you know, I just saw the beauty of it, like conversating with not only people of the youth, but people who are older, and look at it from both perspectives, like different perspectives.
Brilliant. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Honestly, it's a pleasure.
Likewise.
So just to start us off, why do you think more and more young people are becoming more active, politically, but also socially active now? What do you think is the driving force?
So for me, one thing I always hear is people want change, right? Like a lot of people will always say, I want change. But it's just a questioning of, okay, but what are we going to do about it? Because here we are following the same cycle, and this could be education-wise and like as well. Here we are following the same cycle that those now with the higher status have gone through. But here we are now also questioning why the existence of gangs, homelessness and wars in different countries are still present. You know, when does this cycle actually break? And that's a question us the youth question ourselves a lot. And often we feel like social media has led us to realize that in a sense as well. Like as you know, as much as people want to point their fingers at the media that it's a negative thing, it has actually like led us to realize many things of what is going around the world. Like we've been introduced to so many acts of violence, acts of hate and crime, but also acts of kindness and acts of love. So so here we are following the same cycle that those who now claim power and have a higher status have gone through. Yet here we are now also questioning why the existence of gangs, homelessness and wars in different countries are still present. So when does the cycle actually break? Because like I said, this cycle is just continuous. For example, education system, we're going through, we're learning the same things as we did in the past, and like there is no evolution really. You know, schools become more schools become more of an institute. So for me, the question is like, what is the difference between education and school? Like, what differs between it? You know,
and do you think
is something.
Roanne, do you think that social media has highlighted the problem, but also like offered possible solutions or a space for young people to actually come together and talk about what those problems are?
Yeah. Like when I first started, I started on social media. Like people didn't even know who was running the accounts. Like I started the social media account, and then there were people. There was a girls group chat, a boys group chat, a girls and a boys group chat, just all starting conversations of what's going on around the world and what they don't like about it and what they want to change.
Amazing. What about you, Abdullah? Why do you think there's a growing rise in youth activism at the moment?
I think like from our lived experiences, we've seen our parents, for example, they come to this country, they put efforts for us to come they sacrifice their livelihood to come here, or have come from war zones. And I think like it was to give us a better opportunity. And so for us, it was about, okay, we're here now. The pressure is on us from our elder generation, but at the same time from, the fact that, our parents came here for a better life, for us to start fresh. I think the education system by itself is not enough. Having had the experience of going to secondary school and sixth form, we, from a young age, even people from nursery, experience the injustice, the structural racism, being left out, expected to get that C grade rather than going for the best possible grade. So I think when young people are getting involved, it's because they want a better life, they want a better future for their kids as well. And I think like society puts us in a difficult situation. For example, burn grief. When I walk through burn grief, I see gangs, I see poverty, I see how people are struggling. And I wouldn't say the same if I walk through Totley, for instance. So I
And
think
for those who are listening, these are two very distinct areas in Sheffield that are based within different localities demographically.
yeah, and I think like change is not going to come if we don't change ourselves, and if we don't put ourselves out there, and if we don't change the system, no one's going to speak for us. And I personally believe, I don't 100% believe in allyship, but I do believe in it in some cases, but I don't believe that allies are always the answer, or that they will speak for us all. Everyone's got their own interest to put first. So I think as young people, we want to see a future where it's a fairer society, there's justice, social justice, that people are not seen by borders, but they're actually seen as a human individual, as an individual. And I think that's what we want to see as young people. And I think at times the change for us is through social media, through getting involved politically, socially, and that's why I think like education, for example, for me is a route, and I think it could be a route for so many people, and that's why the emphasis now has to focus massively on the education sector, and that needs to change within itself. The institutions itself at the moment, the education system doesn't work, and so our responsibility is to focus on that, but also we lack role models in the institutions itself. And I think many of us, like people my age, for instance, I know they would have done a lot better in schools if we had better role models, if we had people who looked out for us, that were not just from our families, but like there were people that we've seen, this person's made it, now I know I can make it. And I think that's where we're at the moment.
Yeah. Can you build on that a little bit more, like the need for role models and representation? Why is that important for young people?
I'll give you an example. Like I remember the day that I got elected as president, and the happiness that I saw on people's faces was crazy. Like I never saw people this happy before. And I remember there was a social that I organized for Muslim students, and I couldn't attend after we won the elections. I couldn't attend because I was so tired from campaigning that I zoned out for weeks. And I remember the people around me told me that basically in the event social, everyone was celebrating like they'd never before, and so many people came to the events that never came before, and only just to say, well done, thank you for running for us. Now we have a representation, we have someone from us there. And I think for me, especially when I see people like Majid, when I see people like yourself, out there being active, it does motivate us. And I remember when at Hala, one of the main things that I wanted to focus on that I think we achieved but we couldn't continue effectively was the race network between staff and students. And that for me was powerful, because I remember when we sat in the meeting, so we organized, for those who are watching, we basically set up a group, like an organization between staff of color and students of color, where we can come together, raise issues that we have as staff and as students, and see how we can work together. And I remember a lot of the staff saying to me that, you setting this up it's not just important for you guys, it's actually important for us, because sometimes we don't know how we could speak to other students of color who face similar issues to what we face. And so sometimes the role models that we have actually look up to us as well.
Absolutely.
We didn't have that opportunity that you guys are having, and you guys using the opportunity. And I think for me personally, I was having a difficult time with my degree when I still do, but I was having a difficult time with my degree. And I remember that I wasn't planning to continue, and I was planning to move aside and everything like that. But I had Maxine, I had yourself, I had so many people around me that, without them needing to advise me, I knew that I needed to do this. I needed to continue what I was doing. So I think role models is really, really important. And I wish I had that when I was younger. But now I see many of my friends, like Hassan, for example, teachers, people who, when you go to schools now, you will see more, not enough, but you will see more people of color that are academics, that are, educators. And I think once we put our foot in different industries, we'll be able to do it. And that's something that I'm eager to see in engineering, that it's already there, but I don't see it enough for me to be more willing. And I think that's why role model is really important, and self-organizing within our communities.
I'm wrong. What about you? What is the importance of role models and representation for young people?
Oh, massive, massive. So, for example, when I first wanted to start this, I realized one thing that I was lacking was actually confidence. I found that I was very fortunate to find that in the people in my community. However, I didn't know they were there before I reached out, you know. So I'm fortunate for that. And speaking on school as well, like, one thing I realized is the teachers who actually taught me my subject, I felt like they didn't know who I was really. Like I honestly felt like two different individuals, like outside of school and inside of school. So inside of school, I was just that girl in class daydreaming, like I didn't understand what was going on. And then outside of school, I was there reading books, you know, there trying to sending emails, trying to, you know, do some youth activism. So, but for me, a role model in school was actually the caretaker. So, a story about the caretaker in my school. So, this is also like, I never felt, I realized like the only time I felt I actually was expressing who I was in school, in the school building, was actually outside of school hours. So, for example, I only live like a 4-minute walk from school, but I used to get there at 7:30 just so I could go to the main hall while the caretaker's getting everything ready, like the stools and everything ready, and I could be like reading my speech out while he's doing it. So we're both just like, he's listening to me, and we just start conversating and having conversations, and he'll tell me about things, you know, he's gone through and everything, and I'll tell him how I see it. So it's just honestly like, he's someone I'm an awe for, and like I'll always be fortunate for having him in my life. But yeah, it's stuff like that.
And that's a really important point, because a lot of times we assume that when we talk about role models and representation in school, we're talking about teachers. And I remember when I was around your age, Roanne, my best friend in the whole school was the librarian.
Yeah.
Like, I would go early in the morning and I would take back the latest book that I'd read, and I'd have a conversation with the librarian about the book that I'd read, and I'd get one and she would recommend another one to me, and it was a really important relationship for me within the school. I think we don't recognize those relationships enough. So
I agree with that as well, to be honest. Sorry, I agree with that as well. I think, like, for me, I think it was very few teachers that were that were teachers in school that it was more the domestic staff that were really, I think they were more like humble and down to earth and willing to speak to us, and from the security to the cleaners to the receptionist. But yeah, I agree.
So Abdullah, I want to pick up on the point that you made earlier on about, especially around the race staff network, how there were staff members that were saying seeing students highlight the issues and come together was empowering for them. And that's a really important point, because if you look at some of the movements that we see at the moment around decolonizing the curriculum, and particularly the one that started it all off, why is my curriculum white?
Yeah.
That was started by students. It was students saying, we're not happy with what we're being taught. The curriculum doesn't reflect our experiences and the knowledges that we have. But it opened the door for a lot of academics and staff of colour to be able to say, finally, the students are pushing it, as well as us trying to push it from our end, that there's now a platform and people are now talking about it. How important do you think it is for structural change to be pushed by students?
I think very important. I think students, they really underestimate the power they have in institutions, really underestimate it. And I remember, like, even this year I was asked to deliver a training session for course reps, and I remember telling them that literally you have more power than your own staff. Like, you can do things, you can change things around. I remember when we organized the Why is My Curriculum White campaign, we had a lot of backlash actually, and the university didn't want us to use that title, and the union as well. But anyway, we managed to do it. But I think, like, I do agree, like, it's an essential campaign, because when I was organizing it, I was still like, I was reading a book and I was using my knowledge based on a book. And I don't know if actually read it, the Decolonising University. So I didn't even finish it. I was reading like bits of it, and I was traveling I was traveling from one uni to another, trying to understand how they've been organizing it. And I remember I went to Leeds, because Leeds is the closest one. So I went to Leeds, their event, and they were talking about decolonizing geography. And when I went to the event, oh my days, it was absolutely amazing. The number of students that were in that room were about 400 students, all there because they wanted to decolonize, half of which were white students. So it wasn't like, it's not a certain demographic. Everyone wants this. And so I think it needs to come from students. And when I was working with Jacqueline Stevenson, who was the person who was leading on the attainment gap on this, I remember when we were going to different faculties and departments, the students made valuable points towards why we should decolonize, why we should look into our curriculums and why they don't work. But they couldn't link it to the campaign itself. They just seen it as anti-white, or their perspective was not there in the correct place, even though what they were thinking actually related to the campaign. I think it's about making the students understand. So when I put, for example, on the poster, why is my curriculum why? I didn't put it there because why is my curriculum why? I wanted students to come and challenge me. And so when they came, they actually understood what it was about. And I remember having messages from students saying, how can you be an anti-racist campaigner, but then have this title, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, come to the event and then you'll know why. And then literally they came and they challenged and they learned a lot from me and their perspective changed. And I know just from that campaign that we had at Hallam, like Humanities, they started the individual campaign, in their I think it was English language or English literature. And so other which ones as well, Maths was looking into the figures that they have. So having more like Arab scholars mention like little bits of that. I think there was another one as well, but there was at least 5 different art and design as well. You would never expect art and design. They were interested and they wanted to look into like how they can be more open and look at wider perspective. I think I agree. Students, they have to get involved. And I remember when I was going to those department meetings, we didn't have students. It was only staff. And so the message was harder to get out there. But when we have students, it was a lot easier. Even when we launched the event, half of the people there were staff. They weren't students. Half were students, half were staff, but it wasn't enough. And I think if the union, for example, put more emphasis on this campaign, they'll get a lot more feedback from students about how things need to change. Because all of the students that I know, they talk about how they can't relate to the topics that's been mentioned. There's always like a middle-aged white man that's been the main figure, and it just makes them different from what they're learning. And they have to act in a certain way for them to achieve what they want to achieve. And that's not what education is about. It's about having passion, liking what what you're studying and all sorts. But I think students have to get involved. If they don't get involved, then they can't expect the change to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And Rowan, we've talked a lot about how a lot of these initiatives were started up by students and their activism. But if you look at the conversations now around decolonising education within schools, there isn't much, the voices of young people aren't at the forefront. Why do you think that is, and what can we do to make sure that young people are actually pushing this forward within schools as well as within higher education?
So really, it's just like, for example, me, if I didn't have the core principles of confidence and like wanting to stretch out of my comfort zone and seek new opportunities, you know, I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't have believed that like I could speak on matters, you know, and you know, it's not a thing that's birth given, you know, it could be taught. So it's really confidence in themselves and helping them identify that in the system, which is what we lack right now. And one thing I am for, and I always will be for, is to teach these kids their history. You know, let them learn their history and let them understand their history. Let them speak on it with pride and say, yes, those are my ancestors, and yes, I am a result of them. So, you know, and let them understand. And I'm not only on about slave trade and that. I'm talking about as well, like how their ancestors who migrated into this country, you know, how they contributed to the society that we live in right now. But then that leads to questioning that, like, the lessons that are being taught and lectured, whose perspective are they from? You know, who's the author of the story that is being taught?
Yeah, absolutely. So allowing students to see their experiences and their realities in the classroom,
Exactly. Yes,
but
exactly.
also giving them the confidence to ask those questions.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge. That's hugely important. So what do you think is the biggest challenge at the moment in rebuilding trust between young people and adults that work within the system? Because it feels like there's some broken trust there.
Yeah.
Where do you think that comes from, that broken trust, and what do you think could be done to start to heal it and bring it together?
Honestly, the labeling, you know, you tell a child, oh, you're a constant disruption, you won't be successful if you get the current grades, if you stay by it, or don't hang around with that friend. You know, I've heard that a lot, you know, like, don't hang around with that type of person. And it's just like, okay, so here you are, a teacher who's getting paid to say this to me, claiming that you actually cater for my, not only my educational needs, but my personal needs, and you're telling me who to chill with. Like, these, I do believe that, honestly, there is no relationship between us, the younger, and them, the older. And that just, like, leads me to question myself, like, you know, is the following restrictions, like, what causes these collisions, like, that are happening right now? Like, you know, we don't trust them, they don't trust us. We underestimate them, they underestimate us. So I think it's a fact where, honestly, just sitting down, and if I am telling you my point of view, you not to take it as me arguing, you know, because that's what's seen a lot. So say a teacher, like, send someone outside of class and the child's trying to argue their point of view. No, you're arguing. Like, why can't it be as me stating my opinion, in a sense? So I think that's where the trust is, like, where we don't really, it's the lack of listening, you know, listening to each other. It is, you know, it's a massive gift, you know, when you, the more you listen, the more you understand.
Abdullah, what do you think? I completely agree with you, Roanne, as well. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like there needs to be a balance between being an academic and being a student. I'll give an example of like uni. I feel like the academics, they just act like they know it all the time, which probably they do, but not all.
They don't.
But literally, that's how they act with students. There's not like a human level of an understanding. It'll be very rare finding an academic that's on a level with students. And like, for example, I was on a phone call yesterday with the department, with my department, and they were talking about right end of the call, and they were saying to me, "So Abdullah, how can we get more young black boys engaged with teachings in school and in university, because they seem like they don't want to ask for help?" And I was just like, well, and it was in a phone call in front of other academics, so I didn't really want to like talk my opinion there and then, because I'm a student this year. But so for me, it was more about, you know, like, you know, and I've explained this to them previously, like, we have to be on a level with students. We can't be like just the people that know it all, or like there's no set rule book, you know. Like, I've done like assistant teaching, and I've seen how, you know, when I'm on a level with the kids, when I give them the time, when I value them, they listen. And even if they mess about their kids, we need to give them the chances, we need to give them the opportunities, we need to be patient. But like, for example, in Sheffield, like, there's no patience, there's no way of proper dealing with kids that might be trouble or might be having issues. And like, for example, permanent exclusion in Sheffield is like 65% higher than like the national average.
Yeah.
You know, how can that happen in Sheffield? You know, like, if I'm not mistaken, there was a time that Sheffield was second highest in England. So in terms of excluding kids. And I know from when I was in school, the amount of kids that my age that were excluded was ridiculous. It was a norm. It was absolute norm. And I think like it needs to be on a level, but I think it shows a disparity in society between the younger and the older generation. Because if it worked properly, the younger generation will humble themselves to listen and be patient with the elder community, and the elder community will show compassion to the younger generation and be more of an advisor than telling them what they should and shouldn't do. And I think there's massive disparities between the young and the older generation. But at the same time, the generation difference is there's a massive gap. So there can't be an expectation that they'll always understand each other. So I think there are ways to work around it, but I think the education system focuses more on behavior than actual teaching and showing the passion. And I think, for example, for me, like the subject that I enjoyed when I was in school, there's two subjects that I enjoyed. I enjoyed history and I enjoyed maths. And that was because of the academics that were there and present that, you know, that showed me the passion that, you know, made me to like the subjects. I never went into history, but I still really enjoyed it, even though it was from one side perspective. We did probably one assignment on slavery, but other than that, it's all about how the academics they respond to students, and I think the way they respond to people of color, especially from working class background, is despicable in a way because they don't really care as if it were a middle class, you know, white individual. And I think, like, I seen it when I was in school, and I know many kids see it now when they're in school as well.
And one of the things that both of you have picked up on is the impact of labeling. So what are some of the labels that are used, and what impact do they have, like long-lasting impact do they have on young people?
So sorry, on the point, like Abdullah was saying about exclusions, like permanent exclusions and stuff. You know, one thing I've seen, one thing that I really focus on right now is like gangs and stuff, and I can't help myself but question, is the current curriculum and the way the students are being treated and talked to a catalyst for the rise in youth crime figures and stuff? For example, the labelling, like how many students have got like excluded or whatever, punishment. It just baffles me, like isolation, for example, right? So isolation, they put them in a room for the full day, and I'll tell you one thing, no work actually gets done in the isolation room. Like they'll give them work, and it's not, you know, I've seen it firsthand. But like looking at the actual definition of isolation, you know, it states denoting a hospital or ward for contagious or infectious diseases. Okay, well, what actually happens to a disease? You know, they, the ones who have power, try and identify where and when it came from. So the cause and how to get rid of it, the cure. So if we're going to look at that perspective, you know, okay, well, give these people hope, you know, give these members of the youth hope. But if you're just excluding them or putting them in an isolation room saying, oh, well, these are the consequences of your actions, okay, aren't we supposed to give our youth a chance to change, you know, give them hope and let them see a different perspective? Like instead of putting them in a room or excluding them, why don't you let them give back to their community? Go do some litter picking in your community around the school, you know, go talk to the old people. But that's just how I see it, really.
Yeah, and a lot of the times in schools when isolation is used, it is about what you said, Abdullah, about managing behaviour, or it's masked as managing behaviour. But Roanne, exactly like you said, it's not about removing discipline and saying that there are consequences to action, but it's about thinking about how can we do it in a way where young people are still being able to be treated with the value and the respect that they deserve, rather than separating them from people and locking them away.
And you know, like in relation to that, it was actually found, I think it was an article in the Star, if I'm not mistaken, it was like 78% of the people who actually referred to in the isolation were either people who had free school meals or people who were on special needs. And so, like, you can tell where, you know, the dysfunctionality of the institution itself, when not knowing how to deal with kids with special needs or working class kids as well, who may be having issues at home, or maybe just, you know, because of poverty or disadvantage as a whole, not being given opportunity. And I think, like, I remember from being in schools, kids are labeled either good or bad.
Yeah.
When really in society, there is no good or bad. is what we choose to make of our decisions. And I think that's where
Absolutely.
schools, they go wrong in. You shouldn't hang around with this guy. He's a bad student. He's a bad individual. And I think this is the issues that, I feel schools, they on purposely develop this issue. And I remember I was smiling because basically I remember I was one time in isolation, and I literally, I was so bored. I was so bored. I kept on asking my teacher for stuff to do, and he wouldn't give me anything to do. I was
Yeah.
like, so shall I just do nothing on the laptop? And he's like, yeah, just do whatever you want. So I just went on it, and I remember actually what I was watching as well. So I put a movie on, and I was watching, I don't know which one it was, but I was watching X-Men, and literally I put a movie on, and
While
then
you
one
were
of
in
this,
isolation.
well,
Oh, you
whilst I was in
joker.
isolation, and because I asked my academic, what should I do? And he was like, I don't know, just do anything. Because the work I did, like, I finished it. And I asked him, what do I do? And he's like, there's nothing for me to give you, just do whatever you want. So I was watching X-Men, I don't know which movie it was. And literally, as I was watching it, one of the senior staff came in to isolation, and he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, he didn't give me any work, so I was like, I might as well just watch a movie then. And I literally, he was baffled, honestly, baffled. Like, but that's what I'm saying. It's like the system is so, like how you said, Mona, it's masked. 100% it's masked. It's not them dealing with behavior, even though that's the more emphasis and focus that they put on as an institution rather than focusing on the teaching itself. But yeah, how you mentioned about labels.
Yeah.
I think, was your question about why do the older generation label younger generation?
Yeah, and what's the impact of it?
Yeah, so I think, like, I'll give an example. Coronavirus now with the pandemic, I've seen a lot of messages where it's these young people, they're out on the streets, which is true. Majority of them are probably young people, but I think just like labeling, like I remember I wrote a Facebook post as well, and I said, I first support young people like me, young people. You need to stop going outside. And then I realized I'm generalizing, so I changed to some young people out there. So I think, like, we have to be careful with the language we use as a community,
Yeah,
and we're not
definitely.
alienating, the younger generation, all the older generation, because even with this coronavirus, the younger generation is like, I'm gonna be all right. It's the older generation, and it's like, no, that's not how we work as a society. And I think there's definitely a disparity between the two. I think, like, what I would say, if there are young people watching this, or who will be watching this, I would say that, from my experience, and something that I'm working on, that I'm not perfect at, and I don't think anyone is perfect at, is that I think we have to be patient with the elder community, because, like, regardless of how sometimes they might not treat us well, we have to really respect them and give them time. And something that I fail to do, but I'm working towards. But I feel like there'll be a time where we're going to be the elder community, so we're going to have to be patient, so that we're able to learn as much from the elder community, so that so that later on, we'll be in a position where we'll be equipped with how to deal with issues in society, and be in a position where we can advise the younger generation.
Absolutely. And one of the important things that you and Roanne both mentioned is the fact that we have a shared responsibility. We have to work together. There isn't this divide that we're constantly being expected to create. The work of decolonizing the curriculum, for example, can't just happen with adults, and it can't just happen with young people. We have to be working on it together. And I think that's the bit that's
100%.
missing at the moment.
Yeah, like when we launched the campaign, like even though, like, I was leading the campaign, I did feel that it was a successful campaign, because the efforts was coming from the students and from the staff, and it was a great event because of the collaboration between students and the staff. And I remember when we organized the campaign, we had a lot of academics and students that never would want to associate themselves with us or get involved with the campaign, wanting to volunteer and get involved. And I think through decolonizing, a lot of work can be done, students and staff together. But I think institutions will always block that campaigns or plans that are happening with all the other projects that universities put in place that might be really useless, but they're in place to distract from real activism to occur in universities or institutions as a whole.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And Roanne, what are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, what was the question?
So just why is it important for us to work together as adults and young people in doing the decolonizing work, rather than staying in this divide of there's young people doing activism and then there are adults that are working within the system? How do we bring the two together?
So for me, simply the answer would be to that, like, if we create a relationship between us and them, you know, that's when we will begin to see change. That is truly when things will start to take action. And, you know, just as I said before, listening, like, you know, the power of listening, it helps you understand each side. So, but yeah, that's it really for me.
Yeah. Brilliant.
But like, sorry, in addition to that as well, like, you know, when we're looking at it, like, I think in this was last year in March, like, I remember like an article from The Guardian came out about, you know, like it's something about academics. It's time to get behind decolonizing, and I definitely agree, but it needs to include students, because, like, for example, I remember the quote where, not quote, the statistics of, you know, like, in 2016, there was recorded black professors, female black professors were around 25, in comparison to 14,000 white professors. And it's like, it just shows how much work we need to do in terms of ensuring that not just as students the curriculum is changed, but also having the right people teaching it, in terms of having more representative people in positions. And I remember at Halong, for instance, where we had the issue of, we had that one black professor, and then even that one black professor that we had left the institution. So it shows how even our academics don't get the support necessary that they need. I remember I spoke to one of my maths teachers that I had in my foundation year, where she joined the student and staff race network now, and back then we never had these conversations. I mean, you wouldn't really, but then now we're having these conversations, and she's telling me about her experiences. And I was like, oh my days, all this time that she was teaching me, and this is the stuff that she's been facing. And so I think, like, it goes both ways. And without it coming together, and without the students and staff coming together, we won't get more staff from people of color, staff of color, and we won't get the curriculum that all students need.
So the importance of creating spaces where we can come together and have dialogue, and as Rowan said, more importantly, listen to each other and listen to each other's experiences.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. This has been such like a discussion with so much wisdom. And
Thank you.
And I think everything that you guys have said highlights what the decolonizing movement is all about: the need for compassion, working together, listening, reflecting, being critical, always learning, challenging power. All of the things that we talk about in this dialogue, it's something that is inherent in what young people are doing as part of their activism anyway. So this is one of the reasons why I think you guys are actually leading the movement. So I just want to give you the final opportunity before we finish to share any final reflections that you have for the people that are listening.
Go, Rowan.
All right, so for me, really, it's that being young just does not mean you're an amateur, right? So you've got so much to give. You know, honestly, like, there will be times where people make you feel like in order to be in such field, you need to represent a certain class, a certain age, or a certain race. But really, you can just be representing the youth. Like, representing the youth as a whole is an amazing thing. You know, it's such there's so much beauty in it. We have so much diversity within us, and so much knowledge, and so much experience. And so if we can give with that back to our society, then I feel like we've got a lot to give, and they've got a lot to listen to. And as we were talking about earlier, like the relation between us and the older, we've got us the younger and us and them the older. We've got so much to give to each other and learn from each other and hear out from each other. So yeah, just keep on speaking, keep on doing your thing, go out there, and yeah, that's it really.
Brilliant, thank you. Abdullah?
Yeah, 100% I agree with everything that Rowan said. I think the main thing I would say is be fearless. You know, challenge the status quo
Yeah.
always, even if you're the only one in the room that will challenge it. And I remember, like, from speaking to friends from school and stuff like that, and they were like, Abdullah was always that challenging guy. You know, he, even if everyone thought the same, he would still challenge it. And I think, like, we have to be like that. We have to, because if we don't do it, who would do it for us?
Yeah.
And I think, for me personally, from my experiences working in an environment where we are really, really the minority, even though we're the majority globally, I think we have to, you know, speak up. And I think don't be scared of your opinions or even the thoughts. Definitely think about what you're going to do. I'll say, think 3 times about it, not just once, and weigh out the options. But then don't wait on someone's approval. Go do it yourself. And I think that is really important and something that, you know, throughout these years I have been struggling with, but at times I've been able to challenge and have my own mind. And I think it's really, really important that we have our own mind, but at the same time go back to your purpose in life. And so for us, if for us, it'll definitely be, you know, going back to our faith, Islam, and making sure that that is our priority, and we, whatever we do is through the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad. But if that's not the case for the rest of you, then it'll be whatever that is the purpose for you. And I think I always see it this way, as you have to enjoy life. If you don't enjoy life, then you'll just be a miserable person that's stuck in the struggles. And I think
Yeah,
there's a time and
definitely.
place for it. There's so many, like, times where, you know, we were depressed in the movement because we're like, oh my days, when is it going to change and stuff like that. But then, you know, when you read about Malcolm X and the struggles that he went through, you know, being shot at his own house, you know, and still having that hope and still being able to enjoy life as he can. And I think that is really, really important for us, not just as young people, but also everyone else as a whole. And I think it doesn't hurt to take people's advice, to listen to their advice. Whether you take it on or not, that's completely up to you. But I think even if you disagree with someone's opinion or you're not going to follow through, it's fine to listen. But obviously, you don't always have to listen to people, because I think sometimes people just are time wasters. But as a whole, be yourself, be fearless, challenge the status quo. Yeah, go for it.
Brilliant. So speak your truth, challenge the status quo, and an important thing that you mentioned, Abdullah, still look after yourself as well,
Yeah,
so that you're
100%.
able to enjoy
The
life.
movement is
Yeah.
like someone said this to me, and a friend of mine said this to me. Like, it's a harsh reality, but it's true. And they said to me, Abdullah, you know, you know, you have to understand that like, when you leave your role, someone else is going to do it. Like, so it's still going to move whether you're there or not. So it's something that I didn't do as much, but I'm advising people to do. It's important to look after ourselves, because the movement will be there whether we are or not. Like, regardless, it's going to be there. So I think we should make sure that we look after ourselves and put time for ourselves.
And that's a great place to end it. Thank you
Yeah.
guys so much for
Thank
joining
you.
me this
Honestly.
morning.
Thank you for organizing, Mona, and
Yeah, thank
Roanne,
you.
for sharing your wisdom.
My
You too,
pleasure.
Abdullah, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.